The era of globalization is characterized by an increase in cross-border trade of goods and services, increased flows of capital, and also in labor migration, all leading to a growing interdependence among countries and further cultural exchange. However, the human face of globalization, international labor migration, has often remained in the shadow of much more discussed economic concerns. So, let's take a closer look at an example of this lesser-known aspect of globalization, namely the social impacts of nurse migration from the Philippines. The rapid aging of the population in Western countries and the lack of local healthcare personnel has led to an increased reliance on foreign labour in the healthcare sector. This has in turn fueled mass migration of healthcare workers from developing countries. The Philippines is the largest exporter of nurses in the world. 1 in 6 foreign-born nurses in OECD countries comes from the Philippines. The Philippines is an interesting case, as the government has promoted the training of nurses for overseas markets as a major export industry. Initially, it was intended as a short-term strategy to tackle high unemployment and public debt, but has continued from the 1970s until today. The creation of government agencies has institutionalized and intensified the export of Filipino workers overseas. More than 8.5 million, or 10% of the Filipino population, are spread across 196 countries, and it is the #1 exporter of nurses worldwide. An estimated 85% of Filipino nurses are working internationally. Over the past 4 decades, the top destinations for Filipino nurses have been the United States and Saudi Arabia, but other markets have gained importance in recent years, in particular the United Kingdom, Ireland, and also the Netherlands. But these statistics tell us little about the personal stories behind the numbers. What does this mean for their families, their children, and the parents that migrating nurses leave behind? As is often the case, these trends bring both positive and negative impacts. We will be looking closer at this. Imagine a traditional Filipino town. A nurse has left her home and country many years ago. What has this changed for her family? Well, the most straightforward impact from her family comes from the money that she sends home, which positively transforms the lives of her family. With increased household income, family members can now afford to renovate their homes, or buy a new one, perhaps purchasing durable goods, such as a TV, or even spending money on leisure activities. What's more, the money sent back home can positively affect other members of the community through an increase in economic activity. There is one more long-lasting positive impact. Families can also use this money to realize their dreams in different ways. They can start a business, like running a rickshaw taxi. Even more importantly, migrants can empower their families to improve their own lives through financing good education. As health insurance is expensive in the Philippines, the money sent back can be used to ensure that family members have access to good healthcare services. So far, so good. But of course, there are 2 sides to every coin. The commercialization of nursing education in the Philippines has led to a rapid increase in the number of nursing graduates. Most graduates choose to study nursing with the intention of going abroad. But when this opportunity doesn't come, and the domestic job market doesn't need them, they can remain unemployed for long periods of time. Despite the poor quality of the health system, the Philippines has an oversupply of nurses. This is why many nurses are forced to work without pay in order to at least gain some experience, or work in lower skilled jobs, and for less money, such as in call centers. Another growing phenomenon resulting from the nursing export industry is the retraining of doctors into nurses, which makes going abroad easier. The commercialization of nursing education in the Philippines has triggered a deterioration in the quality of education, reflected in the stark decline in overall exam performance. Furthermore, rising corruption in the healthcare system has been attributed to commercial ties between recruiting agencies, centers issuing licenses, and nursing schools. As it is often the case, women that train as nurses go abroad and leave their family behind, meaning that other family members have to assume the role as caregivers. However, some of the female nurses migrate before having made their own families, or decide to take their children with them, creating a further problem. The children of Filipino nurses that are raised abroad can become detached from their own culture and are often not even educated in their own mother tongue. This makes communication with family members in the Philippines difficult. However, there are certain factors which mitigate the social costs of parental migration. One of them is strong family ties, an inherent characteristic of Filipino culture, which implies the involvement of the extended family in childcare. The wide availability of communication methods, such as phones and the internet, makes staying in contact across the continents easier. Despite these negative impacts, migration gives nurses and their families the ability to climb the social ladder. For them, education is the key to better living standards and higher social status. In the Philippines, nursing education is very expensive. Some ways of covering tuition fees include selling land, getting into debt, or relying on a rich uncle. Obviously, not everyone has the means to pay for education. Although education improves the lives of some, others at the bottom of the social ladder are excluded. The problems of migrants do not stop when they arrive abroad. In order to work as a nurse in Austria, for example, a nostrification process has to be passed successfully. In the meantime, nurses have to cover their costs by working in lower skilled professions, for example as waiters or babysitters. Those who don't pass the nostrification successfully may end up staying in these jobs. Once abroad and enjoying improved financial and living conditions, migrant nurses feel responsible for providing relatives with education. Quite often, they motivate their family members to also study nursing to be able to join them abroad. This leads to a perpetuation of the culture of migration. Can the cycle be interrupted? What could convince potential migrants to stay put, and motivate nurses already abroad to return home? Incentives such as higher salaries, better working conditions and equipment, better opportunities for career development, higher job security, and higher quality of healthcare provision could entice nurses to look towards home for employment.
Walking round Chicago, I have smuggled U.S. cargo, though you are far away on my wing. By the time we get to Salt Lake, I have packed you in my suitcase, hiding the creases from my old